Welcome to a little segment here on the Fallout Experiment that I like to call What Are You Listening To?, in which I talk about what I've been listening to most, and what I think about it, and why you should maybe go listen to it as well. Today, we're going to talk about Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds' latest effort, Push the Sky Away.
I don't have a green screen of the album. I don't even know. I listen to it on Spotify. If you want to hear it or look at the album artwork, go there or Google, because I don't have it.
So what is there to say about Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds? Well, for those of you who aren't fans of this man, Nick Cave has been in several projects. First and foremost, he's been part of the Birthday Party, a very noisy post-punk, death rock, goth kind of thing. Fierce, fiery, with really jagged, strange guitars and sounds, with kind of a free jazz influence in the mix either, as well. I mean, they're very akin to the Stooges in terms of absolute chaos. So, if that's kind of up your alley, then go check out the Birthday Party. Now, Nick Cave, in around, I want to say 89, formed Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and their first album was From Her to Eternity. And, well, 15 albums later, and a side project known as Grinderman, we get Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds' Push the Sky Away. Now, Nick Cave as a songwriter has always been one of the best. You know, up there with other greats like Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, Lou Reed, David Bowie, Tom Waits. Just really great poetry. Really great, like, almost poetic lyrics that tell stories. And because of that, his work has been very well loved, along with the music and the Baroque kind of post-punk, sort of bluesy, sort of murderer telling you his life story kind of thing. I mean, when you get somebody like Johnny Cash to cover one of your songs, you know you've done something right. So, Nick Cave has been around for a while. He's done 2 albums with the Birthday Party, 2 albums with Grinderman, and then around 15 with the Bad Seeds. That's insane! 19 throughout his career. Not to mention he's written 2 books and a couple of screenplays. He's also done movie soundtracks. He did a version of Sister Ray for There Will Be Blood. You know, that really great film that everybody should go see after this. Now, I'll wait. Anyway, so Push the Sky Away came out about 2 years ago, and when I first heard it, I didn't necessarily understand it, because it's different. It's really weird. It's got internet references, it's kind of ethereal, and Nick Cave has always just been kind of a blues rocker. Now, that's not to say that that's bad to be a blues rocker. I mean, the White Stripes are great, the Black Keys are great, but that's what you expect from Nick Cave, is just kind of a bluesy guitar riff with him being suave and having that deep voice that everybody loves. But this wasn't that. So, where are we with this album? Well, for about 2 years I didn't know. I mean, stuff like Jubilee Street or We Know Who You Are always great because they come off, even though ethereal and different, they have that Nick Cave kind of reeled back poetry that is beautiful and is easy to love. Now, aside from that though, stuff like Down by the Water, or Water's Edge, actually is what I think it's called, and the Mermaid's Tale, it's really kind of hard to just understand songs like that with lines like, she was a catch, I was the match to light up or snatch. I mean, it's like, that's such childish and amateurish stuff. Like, Nick Cave, what the fuck are you doing? You're better than this. What is going on here? Well, let's fast forward to now. Nick Cave has done a documentary called 20,000 Days on Earth, which chronicles a fictionalized report on his 20,000th day on Earth. And Nick Cave has kind of built himself up to be Nick Cave. I know that's hard to understand, especially if you're not like a fan of Nick Cave, but like, when you listen to Nick Cave, the way he sounds, the way he acts, the way you would think that somebody like that would be, he's kind of built that up for himself. And in his music and on stage, he lives that, and because he's so private about his life, it's hard to see him outside of that. And that's what he's done. And that's what he's always wanted. And so then, with Push the Sky Away, you know, the songs are, you know, in one way, they're kind of playing with that idea. And just playing with the craft of being like Nick Cave, of being this kind of looked at and respected singer-songwriter, and kind of twisting that around and having fun with it to a degree. But at the same time, this album is also kind of about what do you do when you have everything. It's sad in a way. You know, like the song Mermaids, when Nick Cave says, "I believe in mermaids," it seems almost childlike, and maybe it is to a degree, but what it really comes off to me as is that Nick Cave is saying, what else do I have to believe in? You know, what else do I have to write about? I've written about God, I've written about love, I've written about death and murder and tragedy and joy and hope and struggle and all these other things that are so intrinsically human. What do I have to write about but mermaids? You know, what else is there to believe in for me? What other thing is there? And that's the theme of the album. What is there? What is there to believe in, and what is there to aspire to now that I've finally come full circle and I'm where I want to be? You know, and like in the song Jubilee Street, when he's saying, "I'm vibrating, I'm changing, look at me now," that line is obviously, you know, it's in the context of that story, it has its own meaning, but in the context of Nick Cave, he is changing. He's gone from Nick Cave, this guy who's a rocker, who's like, oh, he's got this stage personality, to being that persona, and that is all he's wanted out of his life. He's wanted to be that guy, and now he is. So, in a lot of ways, this album is kind of one of Nick Cave's most interesting, because it's not about his typical topics, it's about something more, I guess, personal, more relatable. The idea that, you know, every one of us has something we want, whether it be artistically or otherwise, but once you achieve that, where do you go from there? You know, like, if your dream is to be to get an 8.0 from Pitchfork, and you do that, well, now what do? Do you aspire to go higher, or do you just kind of even out? If your dream is to have a, you know, house with a family and 2 kids and a white picket fence, what do you do once you've achieved that? Do you just kind of coast? I mean, that's kind of what it is. I mean, when Nick Cave says, "Have you heard about the Higgs-Boson blues?" he's saying, have you heard about the achieving everything blues, about having the answers, about having finally gotten that thing that you've wanted all of your life and have it right in front of you? Have you heard of that? And yeah, you have, because everybody has. You know, it's very akin almost, and it's a less obvious line about the same. It has the same sentiment as the much more obvious line in the Modest Mouth song "Life Like Weeds." If you could be everything you ever want, I bet you would be disappointed, which is a great line, but is not quite as poetic and all-encompassing as "Have you heard about the Higgs-Boson blues?" So, for Nick Cave, you know, he could coast on the fact that he's Nick Cave for the rest of his life. He could. But that's not what this album is. For him, the only thing left to do is to keep pushing. To push the sky away, essentially. To push and move the heavens and the mountains and earth away from him and keep moving. Because even though he could coast, that's not what he wants. That's not what he built up. So for him to do that would be such a betrayal of who he's become and what he's wanted out of his life, that now, even though he has everything, the only thing he can do is push all of that aside, say, yes, this is what I've always wanted, and I'm still going to be that, but I'm not going to be it this exact way. I can't, because that defeats everything I've done up until now. So, with this, we see that Nick Cave is human, but we see him as, like, almost a literary human. He's so much bigger than himself. He's so much bigger than we are. He's such a true rock star, and he's kind of, in a way, humanized the rock star, but because the rock star is so godlike that it's so powerful that it can move all of this aside. It's like it's like Lucifer and Paradise Lost. It's much more human than the all-perfect, omnipotent Father in heaven, but it's still a fucking thing that we aren't. It's still this crazy abstract idea and force that is so beyond what we as humans are, that even though we can relate to it, we aren't it, and we can't do what it can do. And I mean, that's really what he's talking about in that album. And as soon as that clicked for me, I mean, that album just became, like I said, if top 5 Nick Cave, that one's probably number 2, beating out Murder Ballads, though still falling behind Let Love In, because Let Love In is, I think, his most powerful work. So, with all that being said, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, a band I would really recommend, and for those that haven't listened to anything, I would say that Push the Skyway is a good start, along with others like Let Love In, Murder Ballads, and From Her to Eternity. For those that have listened to it but really couldn't get behind Push the Skyway, maybe this will help you. Anyway, for the rest of you, have you listened to it? And if you have, I would like to hear your thoughts. And if anybody has anything that they would think would be interesting for me to talk about and give my personal opinion about why this album is good, or even why it's bad, let me know, and I'll give my thoughts. And look forward to more What Are You Listening To in the future. This has been the Fallout Experiment, signing off.